I'm Jim Sorrell, host of Orange County Public Affairs Network. It's important to preserve our county's local history for future generations, and we generally do it well. You may already know that in the 1800s, Goshen was a major center for harness racing, and during the Revolutionary War, George Washington quartered his troops at New Windsor. But Orange County's history stretches much further back than that. You may not have heard that our county's first settlers came here 12,000 years ago, leaving our county with perhaps the oldest site of human occupation in North America. The question this month is, do we save it or blow it up? Long before the pharaohs built the pyramids, the ancestors of the Lenape Indians lived in caves on a hilltop in what is now the town of Goshen. For thousands of years, they hunted caribou herds that came to a great marshy lake, which has since become the black dirt of Pine Island. They left behind a treasure trove of flint, tools, and weapons that to a trained archaeologist can reveal countless details of their daily lives. The Dutchess Quarry cave site, now owned by Orange County, is one of our nation's oldest and most important archaeological sites. Concerned local residents, conservation groups, and archaeologists want to preserve the caves and some surrounding fields by adding 18 acres of Lookout Mountain to the National Register of Historic Places. County Executive Rampey and Bernadette Castro, appointed by Governor Pataki to head the New York State Office of Historic Preservation, have supported another plan for the site. The Dutchess Quarry Mining and Supply Company wants to put less of the site on the National Register. There's a field rich in ancient artifacts just a few hundred feet from the fragile caves. The mining company wants to blast it into gravel. On this episode of the Orange County Public Affairs Network, we'll review how state and county officials have dealt with our county's oldest historic site. Decide for yourself how much they considered the advice of experts and the public good, and how much they look to personal connections and private benefit. 30 years ago, the Dutchess Quarry site was first brought to national attention with the discovery of rare, well-preserved spear points next to bones of caribou, long since gone from the Hudson Valley. Here's Chuck Thomas, the president of the Orange County chapter of the New York State Archaeological Society.
It was initially investigated by members of the Orange County chapter of the New York State Archaeological Association back in 1965. Investigations and excavations in what's now known as Cave Number 1 began then and continued through 1967 as a chapter, Orange County chapter project. As a result of those investigations, there were artifacts and paleo-environmental materials such as bones and so on recovered that possibly dated as early as 12,500 years ago, making that the earliest site in the northeast United States. Subsequent investigations, I should note that that was actually originally published by the Historical Society of Middletown and Wallkill Precinct back in 1973. Went on, it's been written up in such things as National Geographic, September 1979, included a whole article on the earliest man in North America, and the Dutchess Quarry site was included in a map which was included in this issue of the magazine. So it is a nationally important site.
Ray Decker has been a member of the Archaeological Society for 30 years. He gave us a tour of the site.
Geologists tell us that this cave is a solution cavity in dolomite, which is a form of limestone, and that it was formed by the ocean washing against the side of this cliff, probably in a tropical environment at a time when this part of the continent was floating around closer to the equator. After the continental ice sheet, the last one being called the Wisconsin, receded about 18,000 years ago, this and other ground areas became available for occupation by any humans that might come by. And it happens that the first ones that came by were people who typically hunted the caribou. And the caribou migrates every year up to 1,000 miles, so the people would have moved with the caribou. We don't know the name of these people. We don't know what they call themselves. However, when Europeans came here, they encountered the Lenape, and the Lenape say that they are, in fact, the original people, and there really has been nothing to dispute that. We're about 50 feet in from the entrance to Dutchess Quarry Cave number 1. This opening extends to a total of 65 feet that we're aware of. However, indications are that it goes further than that. We're very concerned that blasting operations are planned within probably about 200 feet of this cave, and we think that it's unstable, and those blasting operations may very well collapse the whole thing. The question arises, why is this called Dutchess Quarry 8 and the other one called Dutchess Quarry 1, and where are the others? Dr. Steve Copper had done extensive testing in 1978 and determined there were 9 abnormal conditions that he wanted to investigate. He named the original opening, which you could see, number 1. And the rest he put his graduate students to work on and began to look around. Number 8 happened to be very, very productive, so he did concentrate on that. He did very limited work on the others, and all those need to be investigated yet. With respect to Cave 8, which we're standing in front of now, the tailless slope has not been investigated, and the tailless slope would be the ideal place to live, except in very, very, very foul weather. So we think that in front of Cave 8, in front of Cave 1, and the ledge in between might have also been very heavily occupied, and extensive work can still be done there.
The site is of unusual importance to archaeologists for several reasons. Besides its age, it has been inhabited almost continuously for thousands of years. Artifacts buried in dry caves like these can often be dated with great accuracy. 2 caves have been found and partly excavated so far, but a radar scan indicated there may be several others. We spoke to Professor Herbert Kraft, head of the anthropology department at Seton Hall University in New Jersey. He's the director of the University Museum and Archaeological Research Center. Professor Kraft has written several books on the Indians of New Jersey and Lower New York State and their ancient ancestors. He and his students have been excavating archaeological sites in the region since 1964.
Indians came from Siberia, crossing a land bridge that at one time connected Siberia with Alaska. And then gradually, these people began to wend their way down into what is now the continental United States. How long ago did this happen? Well, at least 15,000 years ago. Well, there are a variety of projectile points that have been found in the Dutchess Quarry Cave area, primarily outside the caves, and these represent some of the types that you could have expected, in that area. They're important because they represent different occupations, different intrusions, you might say, into that area, and they represent the technology of these later people. The axes, of course, were used for woodworking. The caves there, and we don't know how much might yet be found in some of those that could cast very, very important light on some of the ways in which these people lived, the kinds of technologies and other kinds of beliefs and practices and so forth that they may have had. Now, I recognize, of course, that this Dutchess Quarry Cave is being threatened by quarry, gravel quarry, and so forth. And it's rather unfortunate because, as I recall, it's one of the higher points in that locality, which would have enabled people to, for example, scan the horizons to see where the animals were. And today, of course, with the quarrying operations encroaching more and more on these cave sites, I mean, they're going to destroy them. And the only evidence we have, really, of this kind of an occupation in the metropolitan area. So, I know that we went to Albany. We tried very hard to interest the legislature and interest the Historical Commission in in preserving this particular site. In fact, they were unanimous in their support of the site and hoped that it could be preserved. I understand, however, that the local commissioner or whoever it is not so sympathetic. I mean, apparently the man who owns the quarry operations are a contributor to the to the party and so forth, and so apparently they're trying to lean in his favor. But this is an irreplaceable resource. I mean, once destroyed, there is no way that it can ever be put back together again. And I think for the people of
There's more to the site than the caves alone. A partial survey of a 3.5-acre field on top of the mountain unearthed hundreds of tools and weapons. Archaeologists agree that it is important to preserving the historic context of the larger site.
So, Dutchess Quarry Cave is an irreplaceable archaeological resource. Once it's destroyed, there is no way that we can ever put it back together again. And as things are now, the quarrying, or the continued quarrying of stone from that cave is really beginning to affect the environment itself, plus the caves. They could very well collapse one of these days. And in my judgment, it is not only the caves themselves, but also the surrounding environment where these people, they lived in the caves, in a sense. They slept in those caves and sought shelter there, but they were outdoors people, and so they lived in the immediate area outside the cave. So those are as important as the cave itself. And in my judgment, both have to be preserved. And it is a unique opportunity for the people of Orange County to contribute to the heritage of, to our heritage and to our better understanding of the Native Americans who lived there in ages past.
Most of Lookout Mountain is county property. For 26 years, the Dutchess Quarry and Supply Company has leased some of that property from the county for use as a gravel mine. Most of the original Lookout Mountain has been replaced by the quarry pit. Almost 18 acres of mountaintop remain, which include the caves and the artifact-rich open field. Why are these few acres so important to them? Well, the mining company has a very profitable relationship with the county. They pay the county 45 cents for each ton of stone they remove. The company then sells the gravel for up to $14 a ton. The field in question can produce perhaps 200,000 tons of stone, potentially earning the mining company over $1 million. We must note that the attorney and spokesman for the mining company, Dennis Kaplicki, is the chairman of the Goshen Republican Committee. He is active in county Republican affairs and a regular contributor to County Executive Rampey's campaigns. He is also the attorney for the town of Goshen, and his father is the manager of the quarry. In February 1995, both plans were presented to the Board for Historic Preservation at the New York State Office of Parks, Recreation, and Historic Preservation. Those who urged the board to preserve the open field included Professor Kraft of Seton Hall University, Ann Botchin of the Caves Coalition, the Orange County Land Trust, the Audubon Society, and the Sierra Club. The board, a 13-member state panel of experts, gave Commissioner Castro a unanimous recommendation: protect the field along with the caves. Castro, formerly the owner of a sofa bed company and an unsuccessful Republican candidate for U.S. Senate, was appointed by Governor Pataki. In February 1995, both plans were presented to the Board for Historic Preservation at the New York State Office of Parks, Recreation, and Historic Preservation. Those who urged the board to preserve the open field included Professor Kraft of Seton Hall University, Ann Botchin of the Caves Coalition, the Orange County Land Trust, the Audubon Society, and the Sierra Club. The board, a 13-member state panel of experts, gave Commissioner Castro a unanimous recommendation: protect the field along with the caves. Castro, formerly the owner of a sofa bed company and an unsuccessful Republican candidate for U.S. Senate, was appointed by Governor Pataki. In July of '95, Castro toured the cave site with mining company officials and a consultant they had hired. Preservationists and county legislators opposed to mining weren't told of her visit and angrily called for her to revisit the site with them, which she did.
One of my real deep disappointments was that Bernadette Castro, the New York State Parks Commissioner, seemed to take the whole issue so lightly. Admittedly, the Orange County Legislature made the wrong choice, gave her a poor recommendation, but the New York State Historic Preservation Board recommended unanimously that we preserve the larger site. After that, Bernadette Castro came down and paid a secret visit to the site with the mining company. After myself and Dick Roberts and Tom Pahookie raised a real ruckus about that, she came back to look at it again, but frankly, it seemed to me her mind had already been made up.
Defending her first visit, Castro told the Record it was, quote, an unfortunate misunderstanding. I thought the property was owned by the Quarry, not the county, end of quote. Commissioner Castro overruled her own board's decision, giving her approval to the mining company plan. In the spring of '96, she directed the DEC to give the company a mining permit for the field. The Orange County Parks Commissioner defended Commissioner Castro. He wrote, quote, certainly we all respect the preservation of historic sites, but what are we really preserving? There is nothing significant to see since the cave area was mined for limestone in the early '60s. The major artifacts that were found are safely protected in Albany.
Commissioner Bernadette Castro of the State Office of Parks, Recreation, Historic Preservation visited the site twice, I think agonized over it with her professional archaeological staff, and made the decision that this additional 3.5 acres be permitted to be mined, that there wasn't sufficient proof that it would be detrimental to the existing caves as far as any blasting might be concerned, and that the artifacts that were there, through a study done by Rust Environmental and Infrastructure, Inc., there didn't seem to be, after all of the digs, anything more significant that could be found there, and that this would be an appropriate action. Of course, others disagreed with the commissioner's decision, but I think she made it in the best faith possible, and I think that with the safeguards that are put into these drilling procedures, and they are there, that we're pretty sure, you never say 100% sure, that there will be no damage to any of the caves that Chuck is so familiar with. Rust Environment and Infrastructure did a study for the county on the historic significance of the site and a history of all the archaeological digs that were done, and their conclusion was that it was safe to permit this additional 3.5 acres to be mined. Actually, they were retained by the Dutchess Quarry company that submitted the nomination to the National Register.
So the county relied on a study that was paid for by the mining company, and the study said that the archaeological significance of the 3.5 acres was slight, and that blasting in that area would be safe for the rest of the caves.
Yes, that's how I would understand it.
Yes, there was a difference of opinion, but look at the evidence. Local civic groups, archaeologists, and an impartial state panel of experts all said the mountaintop field should be protected, and mining could destroy the caves. The only ones who claimed that the field was unimportant and that blasting would be safe was the mining company, who wanted to turn the field into gravel, and their hired consultant. Unfortunately, that's who Castro and county officials chose to accept. So what happens now? We were told that the National Park Service in Washington would decide if the field would be included in the National Register. But that alone won't save the field. The county legislature still has the final word, because when they renegotiate the lease with the mining company, they can still choose to protect the site.
According to Chuck, it's now in the hands of the National Park Service in Washington, D.C., and I guess that's the ultimate decision, and I believe the county would abide by that, and County Executive Joe Rampey is anxious to preserve the site and wants to make provision for public access.
The commissioner for the New York State Office of Historic Preservation, however, did not go along with her own board's recommendation for preserving our site. Instead, she went for the smaller site proposed by the mining company and submitted that recommendation down to the federal board, that is the National Register of Historic Places. That recommendation went down in December 1995. In March of 1996, the National Register archaeologists sent back both our nomination and the recommended nomination for further information. Rather than allowing that process to unfold naturally, the Commissioner of Historic Preservation, that is Bernadette Castro, our Commissioner of Historic Preservation, bypassed, circumvented the entire review process and wrote a new memo to the state DEC and said, in effect, give the mining company their mining permit.
However, it seems that neither party wants to wait for a federal decision. In early July, the mining company had already bulldozed the topsoil from half the field. Mining opponents condemned it as an illegal violation of the company's contract with the county. Rampey said that even if the contract didn't allow it, the legislature would just change it retroactively.
Recent archaeological surveys by Hartgen Associates showed several loci or sites within this open field, what was an open field. And for that reason, the Dutchess Quarry Coalition approached the New York State Department of Parks and Historic Preservation and did testify in front of the advisory board for that group, and did so successfully. And the advisory board of the New York State Department of Parks and Historic Preservation recommended that all of this field be preserved and nominated and included in the National Registry site, National Landmark site. However, Commissioner Bernadette Castro rejected the unanimous decision of her board and recommended to the New York State Department of Environmental Conservation that they go ahead and issue a permit to Dutchess Quarry Mining Company to destroy this site. And may I emphasize that the land I'm standing on and the land on the other side of this fence that has been recently destroyed superficially with a bulldozer belongs to the people of Orange County. It does not belong to the Orange County legislators. They are the stewards, they are not the owners. And I really wish they understood the difference between stewardship and ownership. And I wish they understood that stewardship requires a much higher degree of responsibility than ownership. The legislators of Orange County have destroyed a very, very significant archaeological site.
About 2 years ago, the Orange County legislature had an opportunity to take a lead in preserving this part of our heritage. The issue was what kind of recommendation we would send to the New York State Parks Department about preserving this site. Orange County legislature, unfortunately, the majority, the Republican majority, chose to preserve a smaller site that didn't include all of the area that many very credible groups really think is part of our heritage in this county. Sierra Club, Orange County Archaeological Society, many other individuals who are involved in the field of archaeology. By choosing to do this, by choosing to nominate the smaller site, they influenced the New York State Parks Department to then, in turn, themselves choose a smaller site. A lot of people have asked me since then why this happened. There are all sorts of answers. Frankly, I didn't think the arguments that were made on the floor of the legislature made very much sense. I think, honestly, it's significant that the chairman of one of the local Republican parties in Orange County works for the mining company, manages the legal affairs of the mining company. And to me, when you're in the Orange County Legislature, one thing I've learned is often that kind of special interest has a huge effect on what the outcome is of legislation. Legislature made very much sense. I think, honestly, it's significant that the chairman of one of the local Republican parties in Orange County works for the mining company, manages the legal affairs of the mining company. And to me, when you're in the Orange County Legislature, one thing I've learned is often that kind of special interest has a huge effect on what the outcome is of legislation.
Now here's a little test. If you had to decide whether a field was archaeologically important, would you take the advice of A, professional archaeologists and conservationists with no financial interest, or B, a company that stood to make a huge profit from the field? If you had to decide whether it was safe to dynamite right next to a fragile National Historic Site, would you take the advice of A, professional archaeologists and conservationists with no financial interest, or B, a company that stood to make a huge profit from dynamiting? If you answered B even once, please don't go shopping for a house, a car, or any major appliance without a friend to help you. Did your elected representative pick B? To find out, call County Government Information at 294-5151 for the name and phone number of your county legislator. Tell them what you think about the Dutchess Quarry cave site. We all need a little help sometime. I'm Jim Sorrell. Thanks for watching Orange County Public Affairs Network.